Okay, the last thing I want to talk about today is beaver. And in eastern Montana, they even have some beaver. But I know that there's certain parts of Montana and Idaho and other parts of the West where beaver aren't a concern, and some places where they are concerned. Primarily tree damage. That's what people are concerned about. However, they also get concerned when beavers start plugging up culverts and they make their dams and creeks flood areas that they don't want to have flooded. So when that occurs, people end up calling and saying, what can I do? When we look at habitat modification, that's the main thing that beaver are doing, is modifying their habitat to make it conducive to them. So if we can keep them from doing that modification, that'll prevent them from being in the area. Certainly the cultural things, the planting of some ornamental trees along creeks and stuff is asking for economic problems when the beavers start chewing on them. But the main things that we use to control beavers is exclusion and trapping. In a lot of ways, exclusion can make more sense because if you have some beavers around and you trap them, chances are you're going to have more beaver come up the creek and you're going to have them there again anyway. But sometimes trapping is what we have to do. But first of all, let's talk about exclusion. Beaver are large animals, they're strong, they're persistent, and so if you're going to protect a tree, you need to use some pretty stout fencing to put around the tree. Now, sometimes people will take wire and put it around the trunk of a tree, and beaver will just push on it and then chew right through it, and they start working on the bark of that tree. And sometimes you really need to pick and choose. If you have a lot of trees and beaver are working on them, you need to pick the ones that are the nicest, the ones you really want to save the most, and spend your time putting barriers around them. We've also had some luck with a mixture of paint. And then we used drywalling sand. It's actually a stucco sand. Mixed that right in the paint and painted it onto the trees. And it lasted for about 3 years. And then, of course, as the weather and the tree grows a little bit, it started flaking off. But the beaver didn't like chewing through that paint sand mixture. And we were using it on some golf courses because it looked just like the tree. It was a grayish green color, and we were trying to save some aspens and cottonwoods. And it worked real good on those. There's some things we can do to prevent culvert plugging, and sometimes that requires putting a fence around it, make in a U shape, or we can make some a contraption where you put rods through some rebar and angle iron, and then you can pull those rods out to release any of the material that the beaver put up against it to plug it, and then it'll wash right through. It's a continuous chore to have to open that up, but if you're in a place where you aren't going to prevent the plugging of that culvert, this can work real well. You can also take a larger fence and put that around the culvert, well away from the culvert, and the beaver will spend their time trying to plug up that fence, and the culvert's open, and then the area that they're making their dam on, the water seeps through it and goes underneath it through some perforated pipe that you lay there, and the thing keeps going. And they'll keep trying to build the dam, but these work real well. They use them a lot in the southeast, and they've used them for years without any problems, and the beaver keep trying to plug them, but they can't change the water level. Another thing that can be done is to have a outlet for a pond. Have that outlet well out into the water rather than putting it right at the dam where the beaver can block it. If you put it out in the water, then the beaver can't go under the water and block it. So that works good too. People, sometimes there's stock ponds, I guess you could call them, that people have made from, probably reservoirs, that people have made from creeks where they have or springs where they have a steady supply of water, and this would work real good for those when they construct it. More sophisticated, but you can make a drain plug with perforations in it that goes right through the dam. But the same principle is the water inlets are under the water, so the beaver can't plug them. And if you are in a situation where you need to remove the beaver, you have a couple options there. The Bailey suitcase trap was invented to live trap beaver. There you lay them along the trail under the water that the beaver are using. And when the beaver swim over it, they hit a trigger, which causes both sides of the suitcase to close over them. And then you go over there, and you have a very mad beaver inside that suitcase. These aren't used much anymore, primarily because nobody wants the beaver that you catch. Forest Service, all these other places, they have beaver now where they want them, and it's hard to take a nuisance beaver and get somebody to take it someplace else because they don't want it, and they don't want to disrupt the colony that they already have that's successful. They don't want to dump a strange beaver in there, and along with the genes and the potential diseases and things like that. So just hard to get rid of them. So people don't trap them much. What's real nice is if you have a local trapper in the area that would be willing to come and trap a beaver. Now, we have our problems in late spring and summer and sometimes into the fall, not the time of year when the trapper is going to make any money off of a pelt. So generally there has to be some trading done where, yes, you can come and trap in the late winter and early spring when the pelts are prime, if you'll also take care of our problems the rest of the year, even though the pelts have no market. And most of the trappers nowadays use body gripping traps. They're similar to that conibear trap I showed you, except they're huge. They are double springed and they are somewhere between 12 and 14 inches in the opening because they're meant for a beaver to think that he can swim through it. And these are set with a tool usually, and they can be very dangerous. Without a doubt, if you catch your arm in there, it can break your arm. So anyways, they have to be used by somebody that knows what they're doing, but they are very effective in controlling beaver. Bank hold traps are still used. Bank hold traps are set up so that as the beaver are stepping onto the bank, they will step on a trap that is submerged just below the bank, and they jump into the deep water where there's a one-way slider that goes down a wire, gets them into the deep water where they can't come up and they drown. And that was used back when the West was being settled, and it's still used as a good method of trapping beaver. So, if people don't want to learn how to do that themselves, this at least lets them know the kind of things that a trapper would be doing if he was trapping these beaver for you. And that's all I have on the beaver.